How long have you been in the Navy?
Oh, me blowed life.
I'm Jamie Britt.
And I'm Heath Britt.
And together we are E14. We have 40 years of naval service.
And each week we discuss a potpourri of topics, which we like to call smoke pit topics.
These are real world topics that concern us, our marriage, and our Navy with a sailor twist.
So join us each week as we dive into the deep end.
Booyah! Hey everyone, welcome to E14 podcast. I'm Jamie Britt.
And I'm Heath Britt.
And together we're E14. To put our disclaimer on the record, the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of our own and not the United States Navy or my command.
So take it or leave it. So we have to do that. So in case people get butthurt, we can say we did the disclaimer.
So we have a very, very, very special guest with us today. Do you want to introduce?
I'd love to, Jamie. It's Summer from the Stressed, Depressed, and Anxious podcast. Welcome on board. Welcome aboard, Summer. Appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. What an honor to be here. Thank you.
We are honored because of all that you have gone through, and we just hope that your story provides some peace or just some coping mechanisms that, you know, others can use in these just weird times that we're in, you know?
I hope so too.
So a little backstory on how I found out about Summer. I heard her first on the Beer in Front podcast with Dave. Shout out to Dave and his great podcast. It was one of the first ones I listened to when we started, and I still listen to today. And then recently, she was hanging out with them crazy ass McGlynn brothers, Ian and Josh from Tavern in Front.
So you were at the questionable bar of life choices, or what?
Bar of questionable life choices. Yeah.
Did you question your life choices, Summer?
Oh, absolutely. I question them every day.
Excuse me. So Summer, first of all, where you live? I know you're a Jersey girl, right?
I am a Jersey girl, a proud Jersey girl, living in America's basement currently, better known as Florida, South Florida, sunny South Florida.
So what's the temperature now there?
It's somewhere around 80 degrees, you know, in hell.
Yeah.
No, it's hot, it's humid. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're not I mean, we're a long ways, but we're still in the South. We're in Southeast Louisiana, not far from New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And it is 40 something degrees right now, maybe 50. And tonight's supposed to get down to 20.
We got a fire. It's chilly. We weren't ready for this.
I know you guys look so cozy.
Yeah, actually, you're welcome. You're on the first
I don't know what we call this.
We revamped our podcast room.
We've revamped our podcast room. We wanted to look more professional, so we got.
I love the Michael Scott in the background, that prison Mike.
But he's always gonna stay.
He's always there. He's always there. No, before we had some lounge chairs, but it was, you know, our posture looked like ass, and
yeah,
I mean, it was cozy. Don't get me wrong.
Professional.
Yeah,
so I love it.
Yeah. So what?
Well, let's hear a little bit about Summer.
Oh, that's what I was gonna do. So let's talk about your childhood real quick. In
oh shit.
Well, dang. I just wanted like a brief introduction.
No, I want to hear about. Well, I'm.
He's like hitting.
I'm anxious though. I'm anxious to hear about your podcast name, right? And it didn't start when you were 30, or I don't know how old you are. It didn't start while you were an adult. It starts when you're a kid. Am I wrong?
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. And as a kid, I was definitely stressed, depressed, and anxious. I would say as a kid, I was more so on the stressed and anxious side. I had a lot of anxiety. I was a bedwetter until the age of like maybe I think 11.
Yeah.
I had so much anxiety that even when I was out, I remember there was one time that we actually, you know, came to visit my uncle in South Florida. We were in Miami Beach and we were like walking along the beach, and I had to pee so bad. And I just didn't want to like interrupt their conversation, the adults' conversation.
Yeah.
I thought they were going to yell at me and just be like, oh, you're so annoying, you know, because like, you know, when kids have to use the bathroom, you're like, oh my God, I got to schlep them to the bathroom. Yeah. And I was so anxious about that. And I was like, oh, I'll just wait for an opportune moment, maybe when like we're walking back to the car or something. And I had held it so long. And then all of a sudden I just went in my pants and I was like, oh no. And they were so pissed at me anyway. It was just that kind of situation. So I was that kid. I was very anxious, and I was very mistrustful of a lot of people. Um, I was so discriminating when it came down to me making friends and things like that. I remember when I was growing up, I had a lot of kids and I probably scarred some people. I talked about it in one of my last episodes because I'm like, was I a bully in a sense? Am I part of some people's worst nightmares? Because when I was a kid,
The
I just
mean girl.
remember, yeah, I remember a lot of kids like wanted to be friends with me, and I just came off of like vibes, I guess you would say. Like I was very intuitive, and if I didn't feel a certain type of energy from a person, I really didn't want to be their friends. I didn't like having so many people crowd around me. So I was very particular about who I wanted to be friends with. And it was just based on nothing but a feeling. And so there was a lot of people or a lot of kids who would come up to me and just like want to play. And I'd be like, no. And I feel like I probably came off as a mean girl when I was like 5, 6 years old. But yeah, I had a lot happen to me in my early childhood that just made me very mistrustful, that I was always anxious about things, and it just sort of grew and grew from there. So, yeah.
So
No.
I mean, well, like what age, I guess, if you don't want to go into it, we don't have to, but what age would this situation happen that made you so mistrustful that kind of led to the rest of your life?
I would say 6 years old.
Okay.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah,
Very young.
very,
Very
very
young.
young.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. So, and that started in Jersey. When did you move to Miami? About what time of your life? You had to get too specific.
High school, so I was probably about, I don't know, 13,
Okay.
summer
Okay.
summer after 8th grade.
So you moved to Paradise.
I moved to Paradise. Yeah. Gotta love it.
But I don't know. I hate no Miami. I've never been there, but I watched a lot of Dexter.
Yeah, we've
And
Yeah.
fans.
Miami looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
No, okay, so here's the thing. Here's the thing, right? So if you come and visit Florida, I would say for about the first 2 weeks, if you're on vacation or whatever, it is great. It's so like Miami in particular is such like a party central place. People come there for the clubs, for the beaches. It is such a nice vibe. It's really beautiful and all that great stuff. But after those 2 weeks of your vacation, you will start to hate it
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I feel like in Florida, like maybe the sun has fried people's brains, but there's bizarre shit that happens down here. I'm
Yes.
sorry, can I cuss on here?
Yes,
Yeah,
but
please.
Okay,
we've
bizarre.
talked to the Florida Men podcast, Florida Men on
I
Florida
love
Man,
them.
and
I love
Yes.
them.
I'm like, what is wrong with you Floridians? Like,
No, seriously, like they capture the essence of like, the people in Florida. Like they just do weird things. Weird stuff goes on here. That's why I call it America's basement, you know. And yeah, I don't know. And I remember coming down here from New Jersey was such a weird experience, even academically, because I think it was like a D state or something. So I remember when I started 9th grade, I started learning things that I had learned in 6th grade in New Jersey. It was so
Yeah.
weird. It was such like a different vibe. But yeah, it can be nice. Don't get me wrong. There's nice, things about a lot of places, but it's also on the flip side, like just bizarre. And, like
I hear you. I guess what surprised me the most, because I'm being from Louisiana, I'm very familiar with the Panhandle. And I figured that's where all the weird shit, well, rednecks, I mean, I happen to be one. I get it. I know how we are. But when you hear Florida, man, a lot of stuff happens in Central Florida, Tampa, Orlando, and then down to Miami too.
Yeah, I mean, weird stuff goes on. It's like, it's not that like, oh, there's crimes that happen in Florida. Crime happens everywhere, even, some places more so than Florida. It's just what actually happens. Like, oh, this guy stuck his dick in a pickle and was like running around. Like, it's like, why is this happening here?
Right.
Brought you to that moment.
Right.
Or like 10, 11 years ago when that guy was eating some other guy's face because he was on bath salts. Like only in Florida would that happen,
I remember that. I was like, zombies is a real thing. It's like The Walking Dead was big. I was like, zombies is real.
I didn't even want to bathe with bath salts after that. I'm like, if I get in my skin.
But I get it, because me and Jamie came from Texas. I transferred here, and then Jamie went from reserves to active duty, and she's a Navy recruiter now. And we left South Texas to New Orleans, and we love New Orleans because we vacation there. That's where I asked her to marry me.
I love New Orleans.
But you get her same shit though. After 2 weeks,
you should never live where you vacation.
No.
That's true.
I hate driving in New Orleans now, especially it's gotten crazy. People getting shot driving down I-10 in New Orleans now.
I heard about that. I did hear about that. That's kind of wild.
Yeah, it was just a few cars in front of me. So.
Yeah, Jamie was in the traffic when it happened.
Oh my God.
Yeah, they thought she was someone else, and it's happening like it seems like every other week now. It's just someone getting shot over stupid stuff on the highway.
It's ridiculous. I don't know why. I don't know why it's gotten so crazy all of a sudden. I mean, it was always crazy. I mean, a lot of murders. You see it on the news every morning, but this is a different level.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah,
people must be bored.
Yeah, that's it.
Right.
That's it. Well, I figured since it got cold, maybe all that stopped for a few days and before it warms up.
Yeah, that's true. They probably don't want to wait around in the cold.
Louisiana, kind of like Florida, we can battle hurricanes, not a big deal, but them temperature drops, we're stuck inside. A bunch of pussies.
I lived in Georgia for a little bit. It's the same thing. Like if there's even a hint of snow, the whole state shuts down.
Yeah,
that's true. Same here. So when did you start how long you've had your podcast?
I had my podcast since about 2019, but when I first started my podcast, it was definitely not with the intention of it actually being a podcast. It was more like me just grabbing my phone and talking into it and like just posting it just to post it. It was like an audio diary, if you will. And I didn't think that I didn't have any like social media for it. I never promoted it. Nobody knew about it. And it wasn't until like one day where some guy, I think he was in like Iceland or I don't even remember where he's from. And he sent me this audio message through Anchor. And he was telling me how much he related to one of my episodes. And I was like, holy shit, people are actually listening to this, and it wasn't until quite some time after that where I decided, okay, you know what I do? Because he was saying in his recording that he felt less alone through hearing someone else, me specifically, talk about some of the things that I had addressed in that episode. And I was like, you know what? It's true, because there's so many times where I feel alone with a certain feeling or experience. And if I could just share what I go through on a day-to-day and help somebody else feel like they're not the only one, then that's awesome. So that's when I really kind of started to take it more seriously.
So from the age of 6 to where you are now, obviously this whole crescendo up into where you're dealing with it and you're speaking openly about it. What kind of like happened in your life or how did you cope with anxiety and depression and all of this stuff previously till now?
So for most of my life, I didn't even really have a name for it, right? Like I didn't really like, think about it as something like I have anxiety or whatever. It was just sort of dealing with the day to day, not knowing why, not having a name to it or anything like that. And it wasn't until my early adulthood, I think, after college, right after college, and I was working and everything seemed to be going fine. But then it got to a point where like my anxiety became really, really debilitating. And so that's when I started to have to address it, because like I couldn't do normal day-to-day things. Like I couldn't just go to work and be fine. I would have panic attacks, anxiety attacks all the time. It feels like a heart attack, very much like a heart attack. And I would end up in the emergency room thinking that, something was really wrong. And they're like, no, you just have anxiety. I'm like, what is going on with me? And that's when I went to go, get some counseling as well. And even during that whole time, I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, am I nuts? Like I had no clue.
Yeah. Well, because I think back in the day, we didn't necessarily put the labels on it that we have today. We just kind of were like, oh, I feel weird about this situation, or, I just not feeling myself today, but we didn't know what to call it or how to pinpoint it,
Yeah, exactly. And like in my household, like nobody really talked about mental health in a serious way. And I only knew about mental health through like watching movies and TV shows, which isn't really a good marker for that or depiction. You just kind of think that anybody going through something like that is just like absolutely nuts. And so that's how I felt for a long time. Even when I was getting counseling, I was like, oh my God, I'm one of those crazy people.
And that didn't help your situation at all.
No, it didn't.
It makes you more anxious.
It absolutely did. And it made me want to hide it, so much. I also with depression in particular, when I was about 17 years old, I was like clinically depressed, really, really bad. I even, had like a suicide attempt in my senior year of high school. It was awful. And I didn't even consider talking to anyone until I was in college and like really, really struggling. and I saw this, thing that basically they offered free counseling, free therapy for students at the school. So I went to one or two sessions, but then I just kind of dropped it because again, I was like, "Oh, I'm not crazy. I don't want to do this. I don't want to deal with this."
Don't want to go to the
So
crazy doc.
it took quite a while.
Wow. And you know what? From listening, if I didn't know your story a little bit from your podcast and obviously the name of your podcast, when I heard you on Tavern in Question, I would never known because you interacted with the McGlynn so well. It was like they were just having a good time, having some drinks with you, and you were killing that tequila. They were killing whiskey, and I would never even known your
because you
adjustment is
just have
great.
such a bubbly
It does,
personality that you would never think depression would be, in your realm. But that's the thing about mental illness, and that we have learned through doing these podcasts, is that it's not what you think it looks like.
Nope.
No, absolutely not. That's part of the whole stigma too, is like, you think that somebody with depression or somebody with anxiety or whatever it is that they're dealing with has to have like a certain look or feel. And I'm like, it's very multifaceted. People are very, multifaceted in general. They're not one dimensional. And
Mhm.
yeah, even though I never, like, I could be feeling like I'm dying, having anxiety attack, and the worst thing to me, worse than dying, would be to tell someone like I'm having an anxiety attack.
Yeah,
Right.
there's something wrong with me. Yeah, I totally get that.
Definitely. So has your podcast been kind of therapeutic for you?
Absolutely. So yeah, it absolutely has been. I mean, so much of the time people say things like you should talk to somebody about what you're going through. And again, like for me, not really trusting people. And honestly, I think, with anybody, like trusting somebody with that is really tough in and of itself. And then there's not a lot of people out there, even though they say they understand, that really truly understand what you're going through. And
Right.
so it makes it difficult. Not everybody has access to therapy. It is very expensive. So for me, when I started my podcast, it was such a relief to just kind of talk. And even when I realized that people were listening, it was even more of a relief because I was like, I am, talking about it. I am putting it out there. But you know what I mean? Like it's still, there's still that aspect of anonymity to it. And
Yeah.
it's so therapeutic to be able to talk about these different situations that I've gone through. So yeah, absolutely.
I was going to ask you about that
Yeah.
because you didn't turn on your camera for our listeners, and you have like just a avatar type of on your podcast, not your picture, which a lot of people do. And so I was wondering, do you kind of keep your identity still hidden so that you can openly discuss these things that are going on with you?
100,000%. 100,000%. It allows me to tell like all of my life stories without actually attaching it to me because I mean, obviously you get a chance to be more open. I feel like if I was, putting my picture out there or, being on camera and things like that, I feel like there's so much more that I wouldn't say. You know what I mean? Like I know myself,
Yeah.
I would cut it out. I'd want to like present myself to the world in a certain way. I'd be more worried about other people who know me finding it and relating stories back to themselves and be like, oh my God, like you're talking about me. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I just would be more fearful to talk about it. But with that anonymity, it allows me to just be free and like open and talk about these things that are like really deeply personal. And I love that.
I do too. I
Let's
like
talk
that.
about her art real quick.
Uh-huh.
It's simple, but it's awesome. By the way,
It
Oh,
has a
thank
whole
you.
story. A whole story. Can you explain it to
Yes.
us for the listeners?
Well, I mean, lavender, first of all, there's a lot of lavender in it,
Yep.
which to me is like really calming and soothing, or it's supposed to be. I use lavender in like so many of the things that I have in my house. So that was part of the color choice. And then the actual girl in the avatar, it's just it's like the pain points, I guess you could say, that you're sort of seeing on her body, and it's naked, and I guess it's like supposed to be, open and just showing you like the pain that I feel on a daily basis.
Right.
And the galaxy in her hair is like
Oh
all
yeah,
of
yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
huge
Right.
galaxy is right, around you, and you're just like feeling all these pressures from all these different points. That's kind of what I see.
It tells a story for sure.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah. So, with your anonymity and everything that you've gone through, what I guess, it's it's hard to talk about your own mental health. It's so hard just to make that jump. When was that point for you when you were, I know you said you grabbed your phone, but was it like a breaking point that you were like, I just have to get this out of my head?
Yeah, I mean, I was going through a lot at the time. I I went from living in South Florida because I basically, just so you know, I grew up in New Jersey, came to South Florida when I was in high school, left, went to college in Boston, came back because my parents are still in Florida, and was working in Florida for a lot of years. And then my parents split up. I moved to Georgia. I was there for about a year and a half. And then I just moved to DC.
Oh, wow.
Been all over the place.
I've been around. I moved to DC for a while and I was doing great. And then I got like this homesick feeling. And even though my parents had already split up, my mom was living in Georgia at the time, my sister and my brother as well. I still decided for some reason, like, I'm just going to move back to Florida. I have a lot of aunts and uncles and cousins there. And I just feel like this homesick sort of feeling. So I'll just move back to South Florida for a while. And then nothing changed. I was still really, really, depressed. And I figured out that, like, it had nothing to do with where I am. It's just, this is how I'm actually feeling. And that was really hard to digest, I guess you could say, because at that point I still felt like, I was blaming a lot of outside factors as to why I wasn't feeling good because I was like, okay, it must be the environment. It must just be like, I just don't, my soul doesn't go with this city. It must be like the people
Right.
I'm around. It must be anything else but what it actually is.
But inside of you. Right?
Exactly. And so I kept trying to change things in my life. That's why I moved around a lot. And anyway, at that point, when I finally came to terms with it, it was just a lot to deal with mentally. And that's the point at which, like, I grabbed my phone. I mean, I journaled a lot throughout my life. I love to write. So I journaled a lot, but it wasn't the same vibe as like talking it out, right? And so
Yeah.
that's when I was like, okay, I am just gonna, I found Anchor and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna start recording this stuff. And it felt so much better. It felt like such a pressure relief off my chest just to know like I could just talk about it. Even if it wasn't to anyone but myself, I could just like get some of the thoughts and feelings out there. And yeah, that's pretty much how it started.
Wow.
Oh,
We're so
that's
glad that you
crazy.
found this podcast,
Yeah.
and that you are sharing your story, because I think it's very important that other people that aren't ready to speak on it and they're not ready to deal with it, but they know that something's not right, need to hear it,
Yeah,
that they're
definitely.
not alone, like you said before.
Absolutely. Because it really does. I mean, all of mental health illnesses have that sort of side effect of like making you feel really alone with it.
Hmm.
Super, super alone. And I don't know. It does. It was very helpful and comforting to me to know that like I'm not the only one that feels that way. And so I know if I could just make somebody, at least one other person feel that way, that would make me, really happy.
I remember the first time I dealt with it was with Jamie. We've talked about this on some of your
Yeah, I
other
actually
episodes.
have never really on our podcast. I've never really opened up yet. It's still kind of new, but I did have an anxiety attack in church of all places, and so it was really something just like, what the heck just happened, And then I had to, of course, go to the therapy and all of that stuff, and I still haven't opened up completely about it, but it was
Yeah.
kind of our first like eye-opening, like,
Yeah.
am I crazy? you know
Yeah.
It was after a deployment. So, you deal with a lot of stuff over there about it's not so much you're fighting a war, you're waiting for it to happen.
right.
The waiting is the worst part of anything like that. And that really can do a number on your head. And it started out like she didn't like firecrackers no more.
Hmm.
You love firecrackers. You love doing fireworks. And she would stay inside the whole time. I was like, that's weird.
Yeah.
And because I was in the Navy too, but she got deployed. I was not. I was on shore duty. So I kind of took care of the home front while she deployed for a year. But yeah, it was crazy because I mean, it was something that we'd never dealt with. So it was really like something out of a movie,
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, anxiety attacks are brutal. And I know a lot of people will say things like, oh, just breathe, and count your breaths. And it's just like, okay, you try doing that if you're having a heart attack, and let's see
Yeah.
how
Let's
easy
see how
that
well
is.
you do it. I mean,
Exactly.
when people explain it like a demon is holding them, it's literally somebody just holding your chest down, and you're just like,
Yeah.
you're like as if somebody was just bearing down on you and squeezing you with all their weight. That's how it feels.
Right.
It's horrible. It is
Awful.
horrible. And it's hard to get to the root of it too, because again, like in those moments, you just start sort of looking around and you're like, I'm at church, or everything's fine. Like, I don't understand why this could possibly be happening. Like, how did I have an anxiety attack? And it's so hard to relate it back to like the source of like what could have caused it. I remember when I went to therapy and I was having anxiety attacks a bunch, to the point where I was making it hard for me to just live my daily life. And my therapist asked me to do homework because I was like, I just don't get this. Like, this is so frustrating. I don't know why my anxiety just comes on out of nowhere when everything is seemingly fine. And she was like, okay, I want you to, take stock of exactly where you are and try to find the common denominator of, what's common about these situations where you're having these anxiety attacks. And it took a lot of thinking and a lot of self-reflection to come to the conclusion that, like, whenever, because I could be in a movie theater, I could be at work, I could be in a car, and I would have anxiety attacks. And I finally realized that basically whenever I was in a place where, yeah, I could leave, like you could walk out of a car, you could tell somebody to stop the car and walk out, or you could like leave work, or you could walk out of a movie theater. But really, whenever I was in a place where like it would be really inconvenient to leave, right?
Right.
And I
Yep.
sort of felt trapped in a way, like I would have anxiety. So it really all kind of related back to the feeling of like being trapped. Like you can't get out, you can't
Right.
leave for whatever reason. And it took so much thinking to boil it down to that, but it really helped me to see, okay, this is why it's happening, and then try to pinpoint like how far back that goes, and like why I'm feeling that way was, a whole nother thing too. So it's kind of nuts when you think about it, but
Yep.
it is worth like the discussion and sort of trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I want to circle back to something that Jamie and Summer were talking about, like when you're having your attack, just breathe, right? Well, it also reminds me, like when we had a segment called "To Hell with the Stigma" about mental health, and somebody said the worst thing you can tell somebody is like, well, go for a run.
Or whatever.
Yeah. What if they don't like running? You're just going to piss them off even more, or make them more anxious, just go for a run.
Yeah, I mean, people say stuff like that all the time because they can't tell the difference between like being anxious, like, because there's a normal anxiety that we as human beings feel, right? Like, oh, I have to do a presentation, of course I'm gonna feel anxious, like I have to do this or that, or like even depression, like, someone died, and so of course you're feeling depressed and things like that. When you're talking to somebody who doesn't really get the whole thing behind like actually having a clinical form of anxiety or depression or something like that, they sort of relate it back to those things. And so they're like, oh, if you're anxious, then, take a walk, like take a deep breath, you know what I mean? Like, or if you're feeling depressed, go hang out with your friends. And that's really where that comes from, because they don't really understand like what depression actually is when it's a clinical illness, or what anxiety is when it's a clinical illness. So I think that's what makes it hard for people to actually relate to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I definitely, I never thought about it until they told me that. I was like, you know what? It makes a lot of sense. If I was having an anxiety attack, or I was depressed and suicidal or whatever, and somebody just tells me, go for a run, I'm like, dude, fuck you. You go for a fucking run.
Seriously. Like, if it was that easy, I'd go.
Yeah, if it was that easy. That's a difference when you're anxious about let's say normal anxiety, like everybody has. Let's say like you got a presentation, or you got whatever. There's steps to kind of alleviate that by being prepared. Now, when you're having no shit anxiety, nothing you can do can help.
No.
It can hit you out of nowhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't let go until it's ready to let go.
And that's the worst part too. I started having anxiety about having anxiety. Like, I was like, I don't want to have an anxiety attack today.
That's what I was gonna say. You're like, every time you're like, oh, I hope that I could go normal today. You're like, just get through today without breaking down.
Yeah. I remember, I guess when I really dealt with anxiety was I had a stroke back in February of last year, like a year ago. And it was crazy. It was subtle. Like I thought I had a pinched nerve, and I went to the hospital and they said, you had a stroke. I'm like, what? what the hell? So of course they let me out a couple of days later, and guess what? I thought I was having another damn stroke because it was so subtle. So every little thing I felt, I thought I was having another stroke. I went back to the hospital in an ambulance 2 days after they let me out. Mm-hmm. So, and it was so bad. My anxiety was so bad. My vitals are going crazy from my own mind, making it go crazy.
Isn't it crazy how you can sort of do that as a human being, like like change the way that your body's reacting just based off of like your thinking? It's insane.
Yeah, they were telling, exactly. They were telling me, hey, you need to calm down a little bit, bud. I was in the ambulance. They were like, I was like, all right, I'll try.
So, Summer, there's this story that Heath is dying to get into with you about your intruder alert. But I want to preface this because you said, we as humans have normal amount of being anxious or stressed or whatever. And I come from an air traffic control background, which can be pretty stressful. But that type of stress calms me down. And it's a little weird that I'm not like,
freaking the hell
out or yelling or whatever. And that was one of the things that he told me about your story was the calmness that you felt. So would you mind sharing that story with us?
Absolutely. Okay, so Intruder Alert was an episode that I recorded on my podcast, and it was really about months ago where somebody tried to broke into my home and tried to attack me. It was crazy. I remember just getting over a period of a week or so, getting like weird text messages, weirdly specific text messages that made it feel like somebody, I don't know, like somebody had seen me somewhere and was like sending me creepy messages, but not creepy enough to where like I was like, oh my God, I need to call 911, but just creepy enough to where it was like, oh, this is strange.
What were they like? I see you, or I saw your yellow shirt, or what were the kind of creepy messages?
It was like, I won't get too deep into it, but it was like kind of sexual in nature. And just like, it was kind of describing an outfit that I had, but like very loose. So it was perfect because it was like loose enough to where it was like maybe somebody saw me, but like not specific enough to where it was like, oh shit, somebody's coming after me, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so, but I just had like this, of course, anxiety and like weird feeling about it. Anyway, I was sitting in my house. It was like a Friday night, just relaxing, and I was alone. And you know how like your house starts like makes weird sounds when you're by yourself or whatever,
like that ice machine in the refrigerator.
Like sounds you never
out of you.
Exactly, sounds like that are always there, but you never hear them until you're alone and your house is quiet. And so when this person was breaking into my home, like I heard some sounds, like a little sounds, but I thought it was like house sounds, but I still had that sick sort of like ooh kind of anxious feeling. And I don't know why, but my fight or flight or freeze is fight, and I learned it the hard way. I've been mugged before. No, and not thank goodness. I mean, thank goodness if it works, but like sometimes that can actually be fatal. Like, how like people say if you're mugged, like, throw your wallet or throw whatever you have and just like take off. Like that's not me for whatever reason.
Whip somebody's ass.
Moments. Yeah, I'm like, and it's not conscious. It's not. It's like it's very like you can't think in that moment at all.
Right.
So I never am thinking in those moments, but afterwards I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me? Like I could have died. You know what I mean? So anyways, when I feel like this sick feeling, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna get up and see what's what. You know what I mean? And basically, this guy was breaking into my sliding glass door, which is really creepy to see somebody standing at your sliding glass door.
I can't even imagine.
Huge guy. Yeah. And comes into my house and tries to like literally attack me. I ran for my freaking life, and was able to get to my front door and get out of my front door. But the stupid part is instead of like, first of all, I never screamed for help at all. At any point in this whole story, I never screamed for help. I went outside, and my landlord at the time, like she is Christian. So she like there was all in the neighborhood, and Florida's a swing state. So all in the neighborhood, it was kind of funny that like people had Trump signs out and they had Biden signs out, and every other house had a different sign. And I guess for her, like when she'd come, she was doing some work on the house or having somebody do some work on the house. And then when she had come, she like put up this like huge wooden cross in front of the house which I was fine with, but it was like this huge, like almost like 10-foot wooden cross, like just stuck in the ground, as opposed to like a political sign, right?
Yeah.
And so that was out there, and she had like it all she had lights on it too, like Christmas lights. It was kind of ridiculous. But anyways, I ran outside, and instead of like running and running down street screaming for help, doing anything that a normal logical person should do, I decided that I'm going to take this thing out of the ground and run back inside my house and try to defend myself with like this 10-foot wooden cross.
You went back into the house.
I went back into the house.
You are the type of person that people scream at the movies. Like,
exactly. Yes! That I realized that 100%. I 100% realized that. So I ran back in the house with this thing to try to attack this guy. He still got the better of me and was like on top of me, and it was terrible. It was terrible. And I remember just like using my nails, clawing at his neck. It was really awful. Anyway, I got away from him again. Went into my room, closed the door. He was like trying to get into my room. Like I remember putting something in front of my door. And then like I had this window that like you have to, it's kind of like those old fashioned windows that you have to like it's like double paned. Does that make sense? Like it's like it's not like it's just straight up window that you open. It's like double paned. And like I somehow managed to get out of this window. Okay. And I had my phone or whatever, grabbed my phone, got out of this window, and then ran down the street down to like the stop sign at the end of the street. And I was so, but it was crazy because I was so calm. I remember just like calling 911, like just being like, yeah, this person just tried to break into my house. Here's my address. Like just describing him. There was no sense of like panic. I don't know if it was like just adrenaline or whatever, but I was 100% like super, super calm about it. And anyway, they were there in like about 5 minutes. They got there. They went in, they apprehended this guy. Like he literally like broke down the door. It was gnarly to see it afterwards. Trying to get to me. But anyways, they managed to get him. I just stayed in a hotel that night. And yeah, I mean, that was pretty much the story.
But you're running down the street to the stop sign. He's still trying to get in the room.
To the door. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Wow. He didn't realize.
I was like, where's the guy at this point? Like, you're just standing there at the stop sign, calmly calling the police. Like,
yeah, he was like destroying my door. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Holy shit. And I know you took some little time off of your podcast for a while after
I
that.
did. I was so creeped out. I mean, I guess this guy had been like, he did see me. I don't know how he got my phone number. He had been like creepily sort of like stalking me for a while. And he had just like terrible intentions to rape and kill me and all these different things. And I don't know, it just really put me off. And like, obviously, like I told you guys, like I've always been distrustful of people. So that just made me like really want to step away from everything and like not even, I mean, have any ties to anything. So I just sort of had to just get off of online, and I just had so much anxiety.
Yeah,
it was really hard to just kind of even though I wanted to so badly to record an episode or do something, I just didn't even want to come online. I changed my number. Like it was really hard. And but finally I'm so glad that I was able to kind of get out of that mindset and come back and record. And I thought, you know what, I have to tell my audience what happened, and I hope that it helps somebody. But obviously, you know, it's a cautionary tale of like what not to do. Like, don't do anything that I do.
I say thank goodness that you're a fighter, because you might not be here with us today if you just froze, you know? So
yeah, but I would have rather like,
well, I don't know if going back and
she went back into the fucking house. Yeah. So if you'd have kept going, you probably never would have had to scratch his daggum eyeballs out.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like I could have just left the house and like, I could have done a lot of things. And again, like, you know, you never know what you're going to do in these situations. Right. Like, I feel like, you know, the only thing that might overtake instinct is like really, really good training. If you have really, really good training, that might overtake your instincts. Yeah. But other than that, like, you don't know what you're going to do in these types of situations. You can say everything you want. I would always say whenever, people discuss like, oh, situations that you could possibly get into, I'm like, I'm going to hide. I would definitely run away. Like there would be, no instance where I try to stand up for myself. And every single time that I've been in these types of situations, I have gone into fight mode for whatever reason. So you don't really know what you're going to do. It's so bizarre. But yeah, don't do that. Don't do any of that. Just get out.
Bizarre. What was the headline the next day? Florida woman attacks would-be attacker with a 10-foot
There
cross.
was no headline. There was no headline. Thank God there was no headline, because I would have been mortified. Like it was terrible. I remember I went into I didn't tell anybody about it. Just by the way, this is how weird it was. Like I didn't tell anyone about it. I got a hotel room for the weekend, and after that, like I just went to work on Monday, like everything was fine. I ended up moving out of the place that I was in and getting into another place. And I never told any of my family about it. They still don't know about it till this day. Like it was just, like I don't know. I didn't want my family to have to worry about it, because I know that they would, and that it would be like, oh my God, like, no, like what happened, and fearing for me all the time. I didn't want to put that anxiety on them, because it was just over. So there was no point of that in my mind. And like, it's so weird, because like there's almost like an embarrassment for me, and it like haven't even been in a situation. So I never told anyone, and I was so glad that it wasn't a headline or anything, because that would have been horrible.
Well, didn't you like borrow money from somebody because you didn't have your wallet?
My sister, I did. My sister, I didn't even want to go back in the house. Yeah, I was like, can you just wire me this money and I'll pay you back? And
don't ask me why.
I literally said in my text, do not ask me why. And her being such a good sister, like she just did it. And she still has no clue why, and she's never asked me why.
Wow.
So yeah.
Wow. Amazing.
Wow, that's crazy. So going back to your anxiety and depression and stress, do you think podcasting, or let me rephrase this, what's the most single thing you think kept you on the right track despite all your mental stuff you're dealing with and anxiety and all that?
I don't know if I am on the right track.
Well, it sounds like it. I mean, I don't know. If people put on masks, we really don't know.
But anytime you're wanting to help others, despite
that's what I think.
Your own struggles, I feel like that's the right track.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was getting at.
Yeah, I mean, podcasting definitely helps with that. It definitely does. And there's a lot of other coping mechanisms. I mean, finding hobbies that I enjoy, still continuing to write and do things of that nature. I don't know. I try to, find positive things that sort of take my mind away from negative thoughts. Also, going to counseling does help too. There's a whole bunch of different mechanisms that I use. Sometimes I like throw myself into work. Like even when I wasn't podcasting, I was like working like 12 hours a day, because that was like a good distraction. And sometimes all you can do is try to distract yourself from the feelings that you're having, which is great if it keeps you alive. That's just my opinion. But yeah, I think throughout any day or any week or month or year, I use hundreds of different coping mechanisms to try to deal with my daily struggles. It's not perfect all the time, but that's what I do. And I like to share it with other people, because again, like if I could help at least one person, it does make me feel better as well.
That's right. Awesome. Yeah. Also the tequila and the ass bags help, right? The fart bags.
Absolutely. I love, yeah.
I couldn't get over the fart bags. I need to get some of them. Those little
yeah. It's called liquid ass. And
liquid ass,
it's a spray that smells disgusting. It smells horrible. And yeah, you can use it on all of your enemies or anybody that you want to prank.
So yeah, do me a favor though. Can you tell Jamie has a lead foot when she's driving. So how would liquid ass get her out of a ticket?
So, okay. So this thing smells like sewer water, like on top of sewer water. It is disgusting. So yes, if you got pulled over for speeding, my recommendation, it would be to take your liquid ass, spray it, a couple times in your car. And then when they ask you to roll down the window, the cop will definitely gag. And you could just be like, sorry, I was having an accident. Like, I really needed to get to the nearest restroom. And they would 100,000% not want to stick around to give you a ticket. They'd be like, get where you're going and get there fast.
Well, I was going to make it to the bathroom until you pulled me over. Now look, you make me do it to myself.
Now you smell it.
Exactly.
Great. Now I just crap my pants.
So as we get ready to close out, Summer, what would be some advice that you would have for our listeners who are feeling, maybe they're feeling like we were talking about before, like, something's not right, but I don't know what it is. I can't pinpoint it. What advice would you give to them to kind of help deal with what they're going through?
Well, I mean, it's hard. That's why I don't really give a lot of advice on my podcast, because it's hard to give advice when you're also faced with those same situations. I think that everybody has a different circumstance in their life. If you can get therapy, I would encourage you to get it, because it is very, very helpful to sit down and talk to somebody who doesn't know you at all and who's not judging you and who's there to try to help you. That's super, super helpful. I know they have a lot of like virtual ones too now, which is awesome, that you don't actually even have to go into the office or anything like that, where you can talk. If you do happen to be fortunate enough to have somebody in your life that you trust, that you can share those feelings with, that's great too. And then there's other mechanisms, anything that helps you to get it out, because so much of that internal self-talk, like if you keep it internal, you never can really sort it out, I guess you could say. So if you even write it down, or even if you record it, not with the intention of making a podcast, but even if you record it and listen back to it and things like that, you can analyze it from a different perspective, because these illnesses tend to lie to you. They tell you that you're alone, they tell you that you're going to die, they tell you all sorts of things. And if you can kind of get it out and sort of like look at it from a different purview, it is very, very helpful. So those are the things that I would say. I mean, even if I've seen people on Twitter and on different platforms like have what they call vent accounts, where again, like, they're for the most part anonymous, but they'll just go on to these platforms and like talk about their feelings and kind of get it out and get support that way. That's also really helpful. Any way you can just get it off your chest and not keep it all inside, is really, really great, because those feelings that you try to suppress a lot of the times are those feelings that sort of unravel, and then you get to be more anxious. You tell yourself like, okay, this is just something I have to do, and I just have to deal with it and suck it up, and like I don't want to think about it, and that goes on for years, and then it just comes out in the form of these illnesses and different physical manifestations that happen to you. So if you can get it out, that's what I recommend. Just get it off your chest.
That is such great advice, because we as military members, we always say we put our emotions in a box and we carry on, and we put it in a box and carry on. But at some point, it's not that the box opens, it starts to disintegrate, and it all comes out at one time. And you can't close the box. Your box just literally is gone, and all these emotions are flooding out that you put away years ago. And if you just had the means to get it out at some way, journaling, podcasting, talking to a friend, therapy, that's just great advice, honestly, because the more we keep it bottled up, the harder it is to deal with all at one time.
Oh yeah, it has to go somewhere. That's the hard part. Like, you don't realize it. It has to go somewhere. I grew up in a household where people are just like, keep it in, like, just keep going. You have to carry on. And I prided myself on that for many years. Like, whatever, just keep going on. It doesn't matter. Just shrug it off. And although in some instances of life that can be good, you still, if something is bothering you, you should get it out, like you just said, in some way, shape, or form, because it does start to fester, it does build up, and it spills out, and it's horrible when it does, because you don't expect it.
Yeah.
Right. And so Summer, tell our audience, our listeners, where they can find you at.
Okay, well, you can find my podcast on any of the platforms that you like to listen. You can go onto my website, stresseddepressedanxious.com, and get all those links as well. You can find me on Twitter, SD_anxious. And I typically post episodes every Monday. So awesome. Yeah.
All right. Hey,
thank you so much for being on with us. I got a lot out of it.
I did too. You were great.
Aw,
I appreciate
thank you so much for having me.
This was great. Definitely probably won't be the last time. So We'd like to have you on again sometime too, if you're willing.
I would love that. I would love that.
Awesome. We're gonna close out, but stick around for a second, okay?
Absolutely.
And with that, we wish you
fair winds
and following seas.